Last year, we did this.
I started out saying, I'm just over the moon excited to be able to be here. And secondly, what I would do is ask, what is the definition of community? And so this is going to be a little different. It's not me hosting and their guests. We're going to have a conversation, okay? So, community. So, Mama Joanne, what does community mean to you? What does it look like? What's the definition of community to you?
Well, community means coming together, literally in unity.
Yes.
That's why unity is built into community.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Because being a community means more than just living near each other.
Yeah.
It means more than sharing certain characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
It means really feeling everybody is connected to you.
Yes. Yes.
We are one.
Yes.
When we are community, we're one.
Yes.
We're one.
Yes.
We ought to see ourselves as one.
Yes.
Quite frankly, we are one in the Lord. Because
Amen.
I'm a woman of God. I believe
Yes.
that when we identify with the real power,
Yeah.
the source that has given us life
Yes.
and love,
Yes.
the breath we're breathing right now
Yes.
is because of the Lord our God.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
And we're able to walk and talk and think.
Yes.
In Him we live and move and have our being.
Yes.
We are one.
Yes.
When we have community, we love one another.
We love one another.
And not any fake love.
Right.
Where you kiss in air, but
Right.
real love. Help
Right.
me, Holy Ghost. Help me, somebody.
Yes. Teach.
Real love.
Teach.
Where you real give your last.
Yes.
Because they connect everyone here. Everyone is connected with us.
Yes.
We are community when we see ourselves as interwoven,
Yes.
interconnected, intersected
Yes.
with our brothers and our sisters. What did Jesus say? Love your brother and your sister as you love yourself.
you
love
love
God
yourself.
first.
As you
So
love
when you
yourself.
love your brother, love your sister as you love yourself, that's community.
Yes. 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 Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Reverend Myoa, if you could impart what your definition is and how you feel about community.
Everything that Reverend Dr. Mama Joanne Watson just said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to extrapolate from that sense of unity, that sense of belonging,
Yeah.
that sense of seeing yourself in every person you
Yeah.
come in contact with.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you want to continue to grow and develop and heal yourself. And
Yeah.
so that brings forward. But I have a psalm.
Come on.
I
now.
have a psalm. This
Mhm.
psalm you've never heard before. I'd like to sing this psalm. This psalm is
Yes.
about a woman
Yes.
who I saw back when I was 28 years old. When
Yeah.
she walked in the room, she lit it up.
Yeah.
She was working. She was faithful. She was
Yeah.
committed. She was supporting women and anyone who had been victim of domestic violence.
My Lord.
She had been the only woman president of the NAACP, the Detroit chapter. She had a radio show telling people
Wake
to
up,
wake up and what
wake up,
time
Detroit.
it was. And I had met at Fellowship Chapel Juliana Malveaux and
Yeah.
Angela Davis,
Yeah.
and I had met Mae Jemison, but it was something about Joanne Watson that when she passed my presence at 28 years old, I said, now, I'd like to model myself after her.
Yes.
And so when she tells me she's proud of
Yeah.
me, she can't remember that when I was 28 and I saw her float in Fellowship Chapel
Float.
and take over the
Float.
microphone,
Float.
that I said, I want to be like her when I
Yes.
grow up.
Yeah.
And so everything that I've done, the education, the work, I had a model. I had someone I can look to that had integrity even in leadership.
Yes.
You can be in leadership but
Yes.
lack integrity. She had integrity
Yes.
in leadership. And so I want to sing this psalm to you, Mama Joanne.
Woo.
I want to thank you. Secondly, when I preached this is our ancestral land. So
Yes.
Kari, a lot of studios is on our ancestral land, right?
Yeah.
Not Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, but our Detroit
Hey.
ancestral
Yes.
You better
land.
say it.
Yes.
Where
yes.
Mother Dear and Mr. Brown bought that house from his GI Bill money.
Mm-hmm.
And Mama Rulac lived in that little house in the back. And then
Come on
Aunt
now.
Janella and Uncle Greg.
Come on, somebody.
Yeah.
Then Vicky, then Mary.
Yeah.
Now Kari lives in this house.
Yeah.
When Mother Dear passed away,
My Lord Jesus.
and my mother-in-law, my mother-in-love,
Mm-hmm.
said, "You gonna preach the eulogy?" I said, Big Ma, I'm not ordained. They're not gonna let me go up in the pulpit in the Presbyterian church. She said, "You're preaching the eulogy." I said, Big Ma, I'm not ordained. They're not gonna let me preach the eulogy in the Presbyterian church. And somehow she told the pastor that for Mary Brown, who had
Hey.
been playing the organ for the Presbyterian church
Come on,
since she was
somebody.
5 years old, was gonna
Yes.
have her granddaughter to preach the sermon. And after I did, Mama Joanne came and prophesied over me because she was at that service. So I want to say community
Yes.
is seeing what you can be right in your neighborhood and
Yes.
then working to become the best version of yourself because you have models. Right? You don't need to go to Hollywood.
Right.
You don't need to go to New York. You just
Tell me.
wake up and look at your own neighborhood
Yes,
and
yes.
find someone that you can pattern yourself after and make a difference
Yeah.
in the community.
Yes. 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 They burning that stage up, ain't they?
One of the things
They
you
burning
must
it
know, nobody makes it by themselves.
Yes.
So when you acknowledge other, she has just been so beautifully kind to me. Because she's done that, I must acknowledge those who have poured into me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, many people don't know that Mother Rosa Parks poured into women like me.
Yes.
She poured, I loved Mother Rosa Parks. I mean, I really loved her.
Yeah.
Because of who, not because of her celebrity and only because of the Montgomery bus boycott, but Mother Parks was a revolutionary.
Yes.
Many people only know the story about the bus, but she was a revolutionary.
Yeah.
Some people know about the Republic of New Africa
Yeah.
and Robert Williams, who had to flee this country because old racist J. Edgar Hoover put him on the FBI most wanted list because he dared pick up arms so he and his family would not be shot down by the Ku Klux Klan in the Carolinas. He said, y'all shoot at us, we gonna shoot back.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called Negroes with Guns. I got a copy at my house.
Yeah.
But Robert Williams was a revolutionary. Mother Parks spoke at his funeral because she loved him.
Yeah.
Mother Parks sat on the front row with Queen Mother Moore at the Detroit Convention for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. She was
Yeah.
not a speaker or a presenter.
Yeah.
She was there because her heart was there.
Yeah.
So when people, but she was a regular member of St. Matthew AME, a
Yeah.
small, humble AME church in this neighborhood on Petoskey.
Yeah.
Right.
Humble,
Yeah.
missionary,
Yes.
fried her own chicken. Come on, somebody. The only person, John Conyers told me himself, that she's the only person who ever told him she wanted her salary reduced because she said people keep giving me awards and plaques and things, and it makes me have to leave your office, and I feel bad when I have to leave. He said, Mother Parks, I'm only paying you $20,000. I mean, you're not making no big, I'm not reducing that.
Right.
I'm not reducing, you taking care of your husband and your mother. I'm not reducing your salary. It's an honor for me to have you on my staff,
Yeah.
Mother Rosa Parks.
Yes.
So to have someone like that say out of her mouth that I was one of her children,
Yes.
nothing could take me higher than that.
Amen.
When Nelson Mandela came here
Yes.
to the old Tiger Stadium, and she was one of the last people added to the VIP list to shake his hand as he got off the plane. While he was shaking the dignitaries, Damon Keith and this one and that one and the mayor, he saw Mother Parks at the end of the line and started shouting, Rosa, Rosa, and ran with his arms outstretched
Yes.
and put his arms around her and
Yes.
picked her up.
Yeah.
He said, your story, your legacy helped keep me alive for the 27 years I was held
Yeah.
in that South African prison.
Yes.
So when we've had somebody like that in Detroit,
In
more
Detroit.
years than she was in Alabama,
Yeah.
That's right.
and who has poured into you, I have to call her name.
Yes.
And Mother Henderson. I've been
Yes.
mentioned by lots of folk.
Yeah.
But I want to mention Mother Rosa Parks because many people only want to give her a one-dimensional characterization
Right.
about the bus.
Right.
She was more than that.
Yes.
She was an activist all of her days. She was a revolutionary, but she loved the Lord.
Yes.
When she joined the ancestors, she had the Bible open to the 23rd Psalm on her chest as she joined Jesus. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Mother Rosa Parks. So I must give honor because nobody makes it by themselves. And I'm so in love with my baby here, Reverend Maya,
Yeah.
who is brilliant,
Yes.
wise beyond her years.
Yes.
And was always respectful of her elders.
Oh, yeah.
Which says a whole lot about her upbringing and her character and her integrity.
So let me start by saying Malcolm X says something like that you can't struggle only within the ground rules of the one you're struggling against. You'll lose every time. And so I start from the premise that the government of the United States is an illegal government. It's a colonial settler government that occupies this land and that they really don't, their claim to ownership is a false claim. So I start from that premise. And so I think any of the land that we're occupying, that we have the right and the responsibility to utilize for our well-being. And part of that includes growing food for ourselves. Now you have to decide, and I was having a conversation with Brother Truth about this, how, if you grown on some land and you don't have so-called title to it, how far are you willing to go? Are you willing to fight and die for that? That's a decision you have to make. But certainly in the short term, I would advocate that if there's underutilized land in our communities, that we take it. We take it, we build on it, we build community gardens, and that we do it. And I'll say with our organization, we're not just doing gardening because we think it's a nice hobby or just because we want Black people to have greater access to food, although we do want that. But for us, it's a pushback against the extractive capitalist system that exists in the food realm in our community, where almost every time that we have to go buy some food, some other ethnic group makes the money that we spend from having to eat. And so that's a characteristic of capitalism, the way they pit, one ethnic group against another and put folks in different positions. So we need to be pushing back against the capitalist system as well as against white supremacy. And one of the ways that we can do it is by beginning to take hold of land in our communities and looking at growing food as an act of resistance, as an act of building power in our communities, and as an act of building a cooperative economy within, the capitalist system as we're trying to dismantle it. I don't know if I answered your question, but
I was getting ready to say that's that could be so many responses to that request of what does it take to grow in the city? It takes heart. It takes a lot of patience. It takes what you have here, and that's some underutilized space. Some folks refer to it as vacant land. It depends on how much you want to grow. You might need a team, or you might just want to grow a little. So a little bit about FFG, which is Feed 'em Freedom Growers. We started with some underutilized vacant lots that had really tall grass, some seeds, about $20 worth of tools, some volunteers from our community, from our neighborhood, from our families, and we got started. So, I think there's so many different models of what this looks like in this city of Detroit. I just gave you a little bit of what we were doing.
And the way it goes depends on us. So the worst case scenario, we can have more and more white people moving into Detroit, buying property in our communities and majority Black communities, gentrifying it and creating gentrified gardens and selling micro sprouts to restaurants in the suburbs surrounding Detroit. That's a possibility. Yeah. Depends on how we act. What I would like to see happen, I would like to see more of us, more Black people and allies who are aware of the dynamics of race and class, to work collectively in order to create kind of an internal economy where we can stop this bleeding that's going on in our community, where we have millions of dollars that's bleeding out of our community that we could be using to build the kind of institutions that we need to have a sane, resilient, prosperous community.
Someone asked me, do I grow 100% of all of my food? And I said, if I grow 100% of my food, you would not be speaking to me right now. You wouldn't see me. But if 100% of the people grew some of their food, that would, shift things as we know them. And I'm just wondering, are people recognizing when you go to the market, what I'm seeing is the food is in worse condition than it was like before pandemic. I haven't been able to find a fresh apple. Any bag of oranges, darn, they're moldy and soggy, and we have the ability to change that, to just walk away from it. There are so many people in our communities and that are doing things that we can tap into. So I spend a lot of my time visioning and dreaming of the future, and I live there, honestly. I'm just visiting y'all.
I was gonna say, Kari, you picked the wrong person to ask about the rules. Is what I wanted you to know, because when you said that first, like, what does it take, or what are we allowed to do? I was like, who am I asking? So I couldn't speak to rules. I would say I've probably grown the least amount of time of everybody up here. So I think the biggest thing I felt like I needed was to kind of latch on to people who are already doing it and kind of learn as much as I could and help out as much as I could and pick up on what they had learned already. I think for me, the biggest thing I needed was probably community, and that, being welcomed so much into the urban gardening community in the city of Detroit was huge. Like, even in this community, I grow on land that I didn't start. It was suggested by other residents of the neighborhood that I grow on a space that was already established that nobody was growing on. So even with that, it was, the support of the community and other people saying, you should do it here.
So really what we're trying to do is create a closed loop system, not just have gardens, but we want to have gardens. We want to have the distribution in place. We want to have the wholesale part in place. We want to have the retail in place. We want to control the post-consumer waste and put that back in the compost. So we're trying to have a system where instead of, and I would say this probably applies to every aspect of our life. I'm talking about food, but really it applies to every aspect of our life. We want to create a system so that our resources, be it our intellectual resources, our dollars, our physical labor, is not extracted by others, but is utilized for our own self-development. And so that's what I would hope we move towards. But in order to do that, we have to develop a consciousness that suggests that we are better working together than doing it individually. And that also has some kind of analysis of the systems that oppress us, right? So again, people are doing this work for various reasons, and people fall on this in various, kind of categories depending on how they see, their future within the context of what we now call the United States of America.
Watching someone just experience something new or learn something new, and someone has this knowledge that they pass down and share and teach, the relationship with the earth, coming to respect the earth in a totally different way. Like Sister just said, the earth is full of medicine. Like, things that we call weeds are simply unwanted growth. That's the language that I use, because a lot of times those things are medicine and useful. But it's a lot more fun than one can imagine. And I've become a bird watcher since I love flowers more than I've ever had, and little animals. So it's a lot of fun for me.
I would say one more benefit to for the youth is that I didn't realize how calming growing was in community, and just how I met some young people who didn't necessarily do well in classrooms, but in growing and farming spaces where they could, move around, stretch out, or just relax if they wanted to, and just connect with the earth, was just so rejuvenating for them. I think that was something I didn't anticipate.
So this is an analogy. I think you need somebody that can separate the egg yolk from the egg white. So it takes a person that's a little more learned or able to extract the necessary stuff from somebody. So if you're giving me a story, I'm not going to rush you, but I have a way of asking questions where we can get to the crux of what you're talking about. We could deal with everything else, but let's get to what's necessary. So there's certain questions or a certain way you can direct the question of the conversation to get to the important stuff. It's all important, but some things are more important than others. So it's like greens, macaroni and cheese, yams, and then the chicken. You want the chicken, but the sides are necessary too. So you got to have somebody that is able to filter through that and sift it all out and pull it all together. And sometimes when we go on social media, we just regurgitate everything. And once it's out there, we think about what we said, but you can't pull it back. It's out there and the world is processing it. And as they process, they're judging it and analyzing it or whatever. And then you get the people that want to pull back, but it's too late now. A million people have heard you say what you said. So I think sometimes we have to, if we're going to post it, reread it before we post it, and then think about it a couple minutes, and then see if it's necessary to post.
And before Catherine comes in, I do want you to definitely take that discipline, but why is that important so much for the Black Detroit experience too?
I think it's an experience, period. Because once you say it, it's out there, and it's always a person or persons waiting to dissect what you said. Well, she said this 5 years ago, and we got the audio from it, or we got the post from it, and we gonna share it. Did she really mean that? Is she a person capable of being a mayor or working with children because she had a conversation about X, Y, and Z? So it's necessary to kind of be able to navigate some things if that's the direction you want to go in. If you just want to put it out there, then put it out there. But then once you put it out there, don't have that feeling of, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Oops. It's no oops in media. It's there, it's out, and it's said, and somebody is running with it.
No, that is the scary thing about media. You know, once you print something, and it's always a little intimidating to see it, you're like, ooh, what did I get right? What did it, you're always working to get it right. I think in print, especially, sometimes for writers whose goal it is to serve Detroit and to serve the community, there are a couple things that have to happen. Sometimes when people who maybe have gone to college, who have these backgrounds, sometimes when it's time to apply that in situations, in working in places like Detroit, there's some unlearning that has to be done. There's some training around how you listen to people. A lot of people who have gone to this school or that school, they think because the mayor said this, or the city council person said this, or the head of this business said this, that it's more important sometimes when the grandmother on the 2 blocks away. And I think when you're actually serving Detroiters, you have to really pull that training aside and say, look, you got to take the bare bones of what you've learned in terms of like pinning down facts, pinning down dates, what's true, what isn't, but apply it to serving people. So you're going to block clubs, you're going to community meetings, you're listening to public comment at city meetings. And this is where, you get the direction for your stories. And then you use, those other skills that you have to line up what people are saying with what's actually true. And you can really break open some stories and break open some new ways to tell stories. At the Michigan Citizen, I'm always extremely proud of our reporting on what happened with emergency management and through the bankruptcy. Recently, we did a story at Bridge Detroit looking at, we wanted to kind of capture the time in Detroit, what's happened from 2010 to 2020. We got the most recent census results. There's been a decline in population. We were operating the census in the pandemic. There's a lot of things that could have led to an undercount, and probably did. But we took the time to really look at what happened in the last 10 years in Detroit, and to measure and match up what happened with almost unprecedented investment downtown. Like really, I mean, Rocket Mortgage moved downtown in 2010. By the end of 2020, they became the largest employer. You saw the Grand Bargain, the Q Line opened in 2017. We just took the time to really nail down all these really specific facts. Conversely, though, you had property tax foreclosure explode, and in 2010 you had 10,000 more than 10,000 properties lost in tax foreclosure, and that started a decade of absolute trauma. You had the emergency manager come in, the loss of Belle Isle. You had just all these things that when you're close to Detroit, really hit Detroit and was very painful for Detroit. In addition to that, you had Detroiters through those years saying, the investment that's happening isn't happening for us. The cost of living is high, our car insurance, you're ignoring this tax foreclosure issue. You started water shutoffs during the bankruptcy. So to take that time and that skill to kind of pin down those exact facts, to really understand what's happened, and also what needs to happen to begin to understand what needs to happen in the next 10 years. You can't expect to not lose population and ignore people's issues. So, that is one of the things that's really interesting about media. It's like marrying that moment of, training reporters to really pay attention to everyday people and working people and the problems they face.
All right, and I guess this definitely throws to both of you. I'm gonna start with this question, because you both have a network that goes well beyond Detroit for all you've done. What's the response that your friends and colleagues and other people say when knowing that you cover media in Detroit? When are you the first person to call when they're like, "Damn, what's on TV about your city?" Like, what's the response? What's the love? What's the like? All right, how are you navigating in the city of Detroit? With the talent, like, where does that come when it comes to, like, I guess from a national scope and maybe even international scope? We playing tennis, so Catherine, you'll start. Then we go over to Coco. What is that take from that group of your peers?
Well, my love of Black media and telling Black stories took me to New York in 1992 because I loved hip hop music, loved it. And within a year, I was working at Vibe. I was managing editor for Russell Simmons magazine for a number of years. So for 10 years in the 90s and early 2000s, I was working to chronicle hip hop culture because to me it was another form of Black expression. It was important. I loved it. That being said, I was also in media at the time when it started turning to celebrity in this icky way. It was the early 2000s. TMZ was starting, Entertainment Weekly, Us Weekly, all that was going. And I joined that hip hop kind of reporting and culture because, that reporting was it was about the culture. It was documented. It was making our culture important and helping to make our culture important. And so when, the shifts and the jobs started going to this other kind of work, I was like, I can't stomach this. I couldn't do it. And I wanted to be serious minded again. I was like, I can't mess around. And so I came back to Detroit and started working on the paper and, the issues that the paper dealt with. And so, when I came back, people were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? But I'm so happy I did it. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. And, a lot of people, a lot of people don't even understand. They can't even fathom sometimes what happens here, the stories that come out of here. And, that's something I really always love to kind of bring to some of my friends who are in national media or in other places. I say, no, this is really true. Or when you come here, this is who you have to talk to. No, you don't understand what's happening. And I do, I feel like we play an important role in doing that.
Now, same thing to you, Coco, because we definitely know you have national connections. Sometimes I call you're in Houston, Chicago. What is the response when they're like, okay, you're in this Detroit media? Like how are people responding to that?
I think at one point, like Catherine said, Detroit media was it. Detroit, and I tell people all over the world, Detroit is an animal within itself. You can't deal with Detroit like you would deal with Houston or Chicago or New York or whatever. Detroit we're very proud, very, very proud people. We hold things very close to us. We hold the culture of Motown and the Big Three, and it's certain things that we own that are us, and it doesn't matter if it's third generation or fifth generation, it's ours, and we got the history. And somebody, if you talk to somebody, they can find somebody within their family that could tell the story of Black Bottom. They can find somebody within their family that could talk about their aunt's cousin, best friend's babysitter that worked for Motown. So we're a different animal, and we have to be dealt with that way. But we experienced the change and the transition of media. We took it kind of hard when the magazines changed and when radio changed, and we kind of felt radio change, and they would threaten us like, hey, if y'all don't get it together, satellite radio is coming. Well, satellite radio was coming anyway. Podcasts were coming anyway. As people became more independent with their thinking and what they wanted to hear and the direction they wanted things to go in, we saw the shift change, and it was like, hey, if you don't get with it, it's going to keep moving. Don't threaten me with that, because change is going to happen anyway. We're going to change. The world is going to change. We're going to be able to communicate all over the world from this little device that's a cell phone. When mobile phones first came out, they was big as this table, and you had to have a bag and carry it on your shoulder. Now you can throw it anywhere and carry it. So the change was going to happen. We just had to navigate how we were going to accept the change and deal with the change. And I think part of the city and part of the culture here really has a hard time accepting it. We don't want the change to be. We don't like some of the things that happen. People are really vocal about, well, why radio isn't this and why isn't that? Because when we needed you to support the concept of radio, you kind of took it for granted. When we needed you to support the concept of the magazines and the newspaper, you all kind of took it for granted. Now the change has happened, and you want to push us back into where we used to be, and you can't go back.
Thank you. I'm feeling optimistic, right? Mm-hmm. As you indicated, a lot of these rights, this was many organizations that came together over 3 years, really, wanting to get the city's constitution, which is the charter, to represent racial equity, to free us from discrimination, to ensure that we had true affordable housing and affordable water, to make sure that people had mobility rights, people with disabilities, transit rights, just so many things that Detroiters, depending on where you live, aren't experiencing. And so we came together with City Council member Castaneda Lopez and Sheffield, and really pulled together some policies and some charter revisions, and participated in that very lengthy, sometimes 9 and 10 hour long meetings several times a week with the Charter Revision Commission to ensure that this city's constitution that is being voted, that we hope will get an opportunity to be voted on, has these rights enshrined within it. And so things like reparations, things like making sure the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History has funding and resources, and that the community has a voice in the programming. Things like ensuring that affordable housing actually means the income of Detroiters. I don't know if a lot of people know, but prior to COVID-19, the median household income in Detroit was $30,000 per year. We're talking about a household. And so since COVID, about 40% of the residents have lost their jobs. So if affordable housing is taking into consideration suburban areas, then it's not affordable for Detroiters. And so we're writing policy ordinances and things that would ensure that residents don't live in the two Detroits that we keep hearing about.
So when we talk about the two Detroits, in this document at the end that you gave, that's an overview of the process and everything, it keys in on a couple points. Right to be free from discrimination, immigrant communities, and establishment of immigrant affairs. And this would even go to what's labeled as Refugee Affairs Commission, language access standards, protection of immigrant communities, disability communities, and establishment of disability affairs, Disability Rights Commission. Let's unpack all of these one by one, but let's start there with rights to be free from discrimination. What are some of the discriminations that people are facing that would be protected in the Detroiters Bill of Rights?
Right. So these are setting up commissions that ensure that Detroiters who have suffered under drastic disparities for the last half century, are land injustice, abandonment, disinvestment, corporate interests taking over infrastructure and businesses in the city. And it's an opportunity to have community members be part of the negotiations in the process, and have advisory boards and opportunities to be in front of city government before they sign contracts and sign these different agreements. We've seen things like the community benefit agreement that was supposed to really benefit community members be kind of usurped by city officials who wrote their own version of it. And then now a lot of community members are realizing that their interests are not being heard when businesses come into the community. And so right to be free from discrimination is racial equity. You would think in a city that's 85% Black that there wouldn't be racial inequity, but if you look at who gets to own the businesses, who gets to know when land is available, who gets the first opportunity at just business opportunities, finance opportunities, how the schools are invested in, and all these other mechanisms that come in place to ensure that we stay at a poverty rate with disinvestment, abandonment, and really a racially inequitable narrative that we've suffered under for a half century. It allows for opportunities for the communities to be at the table, physically at the table, and have a say in how their communities are being invested in.
All right, so you're talking about the say about how our communities are being invested in. That is unique when we think about a lot of people that may feel as though Detroit is a Black city. Detroit has been a Black city, and the people that are here for now, I would say definitely my lifetime, but maybe 6-7 generations in that leadership. How are people facing racial inequity when most of the city is Black? This is an argument that I'm sure is brought up.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've never had a Black governor. So you got to look at legislation beyond just the local officials. And that's not to give any of them an escape, right, from their responsibilities. I like to think of Zora Neale Hurston when she said all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So you got to think about what people's priorities are and follow the dollars, really. And if you follow the dollars and you see, look at this charter proposal fight currently right now with Proposal P. We have community members standing up, coming against a document that many have never read. They never participated in any of the community meetings that happened for over 200 community meetings over 3 years. And now we have folks that are being organized by legislators to come up against the will of the people, essentially. And so, racial inequity is structural, it's spatial, land, it's infrastructure, it's institutions. It's not just the color of the people's skin who have political power.
All right, thank you so much, Winston. Let's see, we're getting assistance from Winston in here and production.
Thank you.
Production, thank you so much. So as we look to the disability rights that exist in Detroit. And so much of this, as we know, Baba Baxter, a friend of Riverwise and a lot of the social justice circles, has enlightened me about so much that does not exist. How does this play a role when we think about entering into a constitution of Detroit? Does this need to be there? But what needs to be sanctioned? And then if more commissions are made, what differences will be made in the quality of life for people that are struggling with disabilities? As right now we're seeing disabilities as not just what we perceive as only physical, but also what's recognized as mental as well.
Right, and chronic illness, right? We have a lot of residents who suffer from chronic illnesses that can't even afford the medications they need to live. And so when you have a disability rights commission, it's thinking about those things. And so one thing that I'm really proud about with the Detroiters Bill of Rights is that folks who are really representative of these rights that we're talking about are experiencing those living experiences. So we had the disability rights community draft the language for these policy. People who suffer from water shutoff drafted the language around water. People who suffer from housing insecurity or have been unhoused drafted the language for right to housing. And so the folks who are most impacted by these systems are the ones who know how to tell us what they need. And so they were instrumental in drafting the language that goes with this Detroiters Bill of Rights and ultimately into the revised charter.
Because like, at what point is this person gonna stop asking for free clothes and become a person that's gonna be a buyer? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I try to make everybody a customer. Like, if I could have charged them, I would have. But I just don't do that to the biggest rapper in the world. But like, for most people, man, I just be like, support me. Especially like the rappers and stuff like that. Like, even if you do got a buzz going on or whatever, I'd be like, I bought your music, I downloaded your album, I paid you, so you should do the same and supporting me with my brand or whatever. And then some people do that. They'd be like, you know what, here, or they'll come by the store and they'll purchase something. But some of them be like, oh man, give it to me and everybody gonna wear it. I'm like, man, listen, I had the biggest rapper in the world wearing it. Everybody didn't wear it still, but when they do that, I just be like, yeah, I know that's not a person that you give nothing free to.
I make my decision based on what kind of content are they posting? What do they have on their website? Like, I literally go and check out every single thing about someone who reaches out to me and says, oh, I want to be an influencer. That's the word they call it, an influencer for your brand. And can you send me some free stuff? But a lot of influencers these days, actually, they want to be paid. Oh, thank you. They want to be paid for posting your stuff. So I don't do a lot of that. I really just rely on my customers. I may network here and there if it's going to benefit me in some type of way or eventually benefit me. If I know someone who's very reputable on Instagram and they're like, hey, honestly, I have never really had nobody just ask me for free stuff like that. I'm going to be real with you. They might want to connect with me and we'll work something out, but I don't just give away free stuff.
Okay, and I know because you are so creative with this, you've done certain partnerships where it's been, your workout boot camps. And then also you got to think about your brand is still connected to Watch Me Melt. So it's a fashion brand, and along with being a fashion brand, it's also a movement that you built too. So how do you tie these together and stay creative, moving both brands forward?
Well, I don't really look at it as two brands. I look at it as one. Watch Me Melt was my personal journey. Sometimes I'm on it, sometimes I'm not. Like I said, sometimes I gain weight, sometimes I lose weight. It's a lifestyle. So I think by just sharing that promotes that. But Melt Fit, which is my actual brand, has its own personal social media page, website, everything. So it's still separate in a sense because one is more personal and the other one is for everybody. Because I don't do the challenges anymore or anything like that. I just really focus on clothing.
And within focusing on clothing, it's definitely going to come to you first. Then it's going to go to Kool-Aid. How do you make the combination as your whole family's here? Because being an entrepreneur is a journey that a family takes on, as like even connecting with my family. So like Big Mom's Coney Carter, my cousin, and she's seeing like more of that grind. And what's so funny is my cousin was one of those people that I saw grind early with things. How do you get your family to buy into your business? Because family does need to buy in. And whether you're in a relationship, for you and you all are in a marriage. How do you get that buy-in from the people in your life to know that this business is real?
I think after they saw me doing it for so long and seeing how it started to take off I recently just got a warehouse earlier this year. So I went from my living room, having boxes everywhere, to my living room and dining room, to my basement and my garage, to my whole house just having stuff everywhere, everyone pulling orders. It really took off for me last year. But prior to that, I think that they just saw that I was really committed. I was constantly pulling orders and doing lives in my living room. And I didn't never try to push my kids away. When I do my lives, My kids might walk through it, or I might have my little one who's 6 now just standing right there with me because she want to be with her mom. I think that just including them in it and letting them see firsthand, okay, this really is a business, but family still comes first. Just, you know, they saw that it was serious.
And same thing for you, Kool-Aid. As we know, you share a space and business with your wife, and soon expecting too. So congratulations, as the clan is expanding. But you got the eldest in effect right now. Like, how did you introduce to your family that, like, this is what I'm doing? And Ashley said a whole lot too. You know what I'm saying? It's so great once you get your whole, like, man, I got a living room back. You know what I'm saying? What is that like? How do you get that buy-in? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
Well, my family, I just use them as like my test market also. Like, when I came up with stuff, I would go to them as if they were customers already. And they'd be like, what is this? I'd be like, okay, well, this is what I'm doing, and blah, blah, blah. And so many people, especially back when I started, like, they were like, what's making you want to do a clothing line? Like, I'm like, because, like, you know, I love fashion. This is my thing. So at first, people was like, you know, well, cool, new T-shirts and hats, so I'll buy them. And once they saw, after years, like, wait a minute, like, this thing is serious, you know, everybody started to really, you know, you need anything to do? You know, I'll help you with this, or I'll come do that. Like, yeah, I got you. So, you know, my grandfather, you know, he passed away a few years ago. He was the guy who I would go to and talk to, like, Granddad, listen, man, like, it's this manufacturer. I want to use them, but the minimum pieces is 200. I don't have the money to order 200 pieces. And he'd be like, all right, now. Like, here's the money to do this. Now, you know, I just let me know what's going on and keep me abreast or whatever. And I would tell people like, yeah, you know, Granddaddy looked out for me. I'm good, all that. So when they seen he cared, they was like, okay, this is really serious. And then all of the family fell in. Like, to this day, you know, they come up to the store once a month at least. Everybody comes up there and they shop, they buy stuff or whatever, and, you know, keep it going through the family. And then they all promote to all of their friends. So it's kind of like a built-in little ecosystem, and it works out.
I can agree that, you know, as my business started growing, I had more family showing up wanting to buy stuff, you know, like, oh yeah, let me support, you know. I gotta support my cousin. Like, okay, you was supporting me 6 years ago, right? But okay.
All right, and with that same support, for you now, it includes your wife. Like, you've grown from working together and really growing in business. Mm-hmm. So can you explain what that relationship was like and building that in a business? Because a lot of times people say, oh man, you can't mix that with business. And how did it work?
It's different with us. Like, I've known her for a long time. We started off, actually, when I first met her, she was modeling for me at a fashion show. And, you know, I was like, yo, she's dope. She can really walk. And I would ask her to help me when I would do pop-ups and, you know, other fashion shows or whatever. She was always right there. Like, we never, like, even thought about talking to each other or anything like that. So it was like, you know, this is a great friend of mine. I can always count on her. And then I had some pop-ups that came up, and she was actually helping run the pop-up shop herself. So I was like, okay, yeah, she's really good. Then I was doing parties, and she started hosting the parties. So she was always there for that. And then, you know, after a while, so long, I'm like, yo, you know, you're pretty dope. I'm like, why don't you, you know, model the brand for me, you know, at the parties, at least wear the stuff or whatever. So she started doing that. And then she came up with an idea for a t-shirt. She just made one for herself. And people started to like it. And she was like, I think I'm going to press up some of these shirts. So she did it. And I didn't know what she did. I was like, where you get that stuff from? She's like, I got these pressed up. I was like, yeah, the girls keep talking about it. And then she just came to me one day like, can you make me a logo? I was like, yeah, I'll make you a logo. And made the logo, and she started really running with the brand. And at the time, I had a store in Midtown. And, you know, we were still just cool. We weren't talking to each other like that. We were just cool. One day, she called me. She was like, can you do this edit for me real quick? I'm going to email this over to you. I was like, all right. I'm like, why you sound like you're in a rush? She was like, I got to go meet this girl and sell her this T-shirt. It was 10:30 at night. I was like, why are you out in the street to sell a T-shirt at 10:30 at night? She was like, I got to get this money. I said, listen, tomorrow, come up to my store. I'm going to clean out a little section, and that's going to be yours. If people want to buy your stuff, they can come to the store and buy it. And she was like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, come on up there. So she came up there. I gave her a key. I was like, you know, you tell people to come here because you're a woman. You can't be traveling on the streets or whatever. And I think that kind of like rubbed her the right way. And before you know it, she was like, you know what? I was like, yeah, I already know. And then it was like, okay, yeah, we're going to do this. And we did it.
So I'm going to piggyback on what Piper was just saying and think about the artist Mums, who was the poet on, I can't remember the show, but he died not too long ago. And there's a video that Mums put on his Instagram that says, you know, a message to artists. And basically the message was, learn the craft, learn all the rules to the craft. If you have to learn it on your own or in a educational institution or however you learn it, just learn the craft, like sop it up, like you're so hungry. Once you figure out the craft, learn the rules of the craft. Learn them over and over and over again until you memorize them. And then break the rules. Learn how to create your own rules that fit for what you do. Because we're sitting at a table right now, we all four. I know I do some work that might be similar to what Halima is doing and maybe what Sterling is doing, but as an interdisciplinary artist, someone who can cross over into performance and movement and images and film or sound. It's all art, but learning the rules and then breaking them. And sometimes learning that failure teaches you some amazing lessons about what not to do again. And so when Halima says, don't be afraid of failure, that's really, really important. There is a storytelling group called the Failure Lab. And what they do is they get what they consider as successful people to tell stories of their greatest failures. And for me, when I was invited to do it, I told the story of how I hadn't had art from 5th grade all the way through my 12th grade of high school. And when I applied to CCS, I was rejected. It pissed me off. That was a failure. But it also lit a fire. Like, oh, did you just tell me no? Oh, that's cute, because I don't accept that. And so failure teaches you how to move forward in something that maybe you're destined to do. But if you let somebody else tell you no and you accept it, then, you know, that's on you. But I'm not good with that. And so understanding that, you know, I'm always hungry for finding out what the rules of the process is, learning them and then breaking them. And so that's kind of how I work. It's almost a bass-ackwards way of working, but I like it. And it works for me. And sometimes if it's too easy, I don't always trust it because I grew up here. And so if it's given to me, it's not always, I don't always accept it. I want to know, you know, what's the hard process of getting there. And so sometimes I work harder and smarter at the same time, and I'm okay because I like getting dirty with it. So that's just how I move.
So it's making me think about how, like, in this culture, we've been conditioned to look at things in terms of binaries. You know, good, bad, right, wrong, masculine, feminine, you know, on and on and on and on and on and on. I think personally, I feel like as long as I'm in the process of love, I can't fail. As long as somebody's suffering, I will never be successful. And I don't desire either. I don't reject the other. So I think about how embarrassment is learned. It's not inherent. And you think about the rapidity of how a child develops. And a baby's learning how to walk, and it falls on his face, and everybody's laughing at it, and it's like laughing back, like, and it gets right back up, and it falls again, and everybody's laughing, and it's laughing too, and then it falls again. But it's getting a step closer each time it gets up to actually walking. And I try to carry that same sentiment in my process of, like, if I'm in a space of something that I feel joy in, then that joy fills me to a point where I don't really have the ability to receive reflections back to me that tell me I'm on the wrong path. So for me, there's no such thing as failing. And at the same time, you know, I feel like everything that we consider good is not good.
Mm-hmm.
We've been conditioned to believe that is good.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the structures that determine what good is weren't rooted in
good.
In good. Exactly. Thank you.
They are not goodologists.
They are not good. Thank you. They are not goodologists. Exactly. So to me, it's like, okay, what does the process look like of letting go of how things will play out and just completely give all of my energy in service of arriving at joy? Because we don't understand the potency and functionality of joy a lot of times. Children understand it and then they get educated out of it. But the joy is inherent to us, you know. So yeah, so for me, like, that's why I never turn down anything that I do. So somebody comes to me and like, hey, do this. I've never done it before. You know, like first time I was asked to DJ, I've never done it before. Do a show where I've never done it before. But my outlook was like, if this goes completely wrong, it's their fault because they asked me to do it. Right? So
Sterling's such a philosopher over here.
So you come to me like, man, that was horrible. I'm like, hey, he put me on the bill. Like that. Take that up with him. You know? So for me, I look at it like it's about constantly attempting to reclaim my innocence. Because in innocence, there's a connection to intuition. And then the connection to intuition is the highest, to me, the highest power and highest voice. So if I'm trusting my intuition, I don't have to know how to do something. I'm connecting to the knowledge that's beyond all of us.
And who's the keeper of that information anyway? Who, like, you know, when I got rejected from CCS, no one gave me a tour. I walked through the halls, I walked in the classes, and I asked the students, I said, can I see what you got? And I was like, oh, you in here though? All right. And I just knew, you know, it was like, so who's the keeper of the past, if you will? You know, those that are let in the yard, in the gate. And then you just have to figure out, like when somebody says knock the wall down, maybe not pushing it, but actually knocking it down. You know, so like just figuring out a different way to enter, you know, and sometimes it might not be the right time of entering or attempting, like just learning the rules and figuring out how to break them, recreate them, attempt at them, and not worry about, like Sterling said, you know, passing, you know, the highest form of joy and innocence is Sterling's approach, and mine is feeding my soul, like Grace Lee Boggs would say, like, now is the time to feed our souls. I'm feeding my souls and hopefully feeding others who are with me on this journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to say, like, who determines what's precious? Who determines what success is and what something is worth? We all do. Yeah. So sliding scale all day. I was so happy to see my kids had a sliding scale arrangement for the lip glosses that they were producing. I was like, oh, okay, great. You know, it's like we can have our market value. We can state this is our corporate price, and we can give to our friends, and we can make stuff together, and we can have a great time doing the actual spending of time. And what do we do with our hands and stuff like that? And yeah, you said something else about like value and precious. Oh yeah, like I went to the Guggenheim when I was little, and I was like super privileged to have this opportunity or whatever. And we saw this painting, and it was so dope. And it was like you were standing on a balcony looking over like the Champs-Elysees, and it was like, you know, just very beautiful and ornate and everything. And then I read the card, and I'm like, oh, this is tempera paint. This was painted with kids paint on cardboard. And it was acquired for $2.5 million. Great lesson. Thank you. And I think it's beautiful too. You know, and it's like the materials, the value, like all of these things are up to us to dictate what they are, you know. So back to that. What is precious? What do you love doing the most? You know?
Well, failure, embarrassment, all that stuff, super subjective to me. Mm-hmm. I learned that from my pens. You know, I grew up straight up drawing with pens. Mm-hmm. I never looked at anything that you would consider a mistake because I knew I couldn't go back and correct it, you know. So a driving force behind anything that I create is always the idea that this is coming from me, this is original, this is my flow, this is what came out, whether it be by accident or on purpose. This is the destined where it was gonna go. You know, I look back at a lot of my old sketches and I go like, this is kind of crappy, but I still appreciate it because I'm like, these are just stepping stones and building blocks to who I was becoming, what I was gonna do, and where I was gonna try to help develop at.